He was handcuffed in broad daylight for doing nothing more than standing outside his own building. Neighbors watched, phones recorded. Officers treated him like a threat before asking a single question. His face stayed calm, but his eyes carried the weight of something far deeper than fear. They thought they had embarrassed another innocent man who had no power to fight back. But minutes later, one phone call changed the entire scene. The same officers who mocked him suddenly went silent. Who was this man, and why did everyone freeze when they learned his name? Marcus Hale lived a life built on discipline, patience, and quiet purpose. Every morning began before sunrise. He ran the same route through the city streets, opened the same small notebook filled with goals, and carried himself with the calm confidence of a man who had worked hard for everything he earned. To most people passing by, he looked ordinary, just another man in a pressed shirt, clean shoes, and steady stride on his way through another busy day. But Marcus was no stranger to being judged before being known. He had felt eyes follow him in expensive stores, watched strangers clutch bags tighter in elevators, and noticed how quickly suspicion could appear when he entered the wrong room. He rarely reacted. Years of experience had taught him that anger often became another weapon used against men who looked like him. That afternoon, Marcus returned to the apartment building where he had lived for nearly 3 years. He carried groceries in one hand and checked messages on his phone with the other. The lobby doors reflected the city behind him, traffic rushing, people hurrying, life moving on as usual. Inside, a new resident stood near the front desk, staring at him with growing concern. Marcus nodded politely and reached for the elevator button. Instead of returning the gesture, the man stepped back and pulled out his phone. Marcus had seen that look before. Within minutes, a patrol car turned the corner, then another. What should have been the simplest moment of his day was about to become something far darker. Marcus barely had time to set the grocery bag down before the lobby doors burst open. 2 officers stepped inside with the kind of urgency usually reserved for danger. Hands rested near their belts. Eyes locked on him instantly. No greeting, no questions about who lived there, just suspicion sharpened into action. Residents began to gather near the mailboxes and glass entrance. Some watched in silence. Others lifted phones, sensing drama before understanding truth. Marcus stood still, palms open, trying to remain calm as the officers moved closer. He knew how quickly calm could be mistaken for defiance, and how fear could be used as an excuse. One officer circled behind him. Another demanded identification before Marcus could explain he was home. He pointed toward the elevator, toward the hallway, toward the apartment upstairs where his keys would fit the lock like they had hundreds of times before. It made no difference. Their faces never changed. The groceries were kicked aside and spilled across the marble floor, fruit rolled under a bench, a carton cracked open. Milk spread in a thin white stream between Marcus's shoes. Then came the hands. They grabbed his wrists, twisted them back, and forced cold metal around them. The lobby gasped. Someone whispered that he must have done something serious. Another person muttered that people like him were always trouble. Marcus heard every word, he said nothing. His heart pounded, but his face remained still. He had learned long ago that innocence did not always protect you. Sometimes innocence only made humiliation quieter. The building manager rushed in, breathless, trying to explain that Marcus had lived there for years. The officers brushed the words aside. They claimed they had received a report about a suspicious man attempting to enter private property. Marcus looked around the lobby he passed through nearly every day and realized, in their eyes, he had become a stranger inside his own home. Outside, more people gathered on the sidewalk. Through the glass, children stared, neighbors whispered, cameras recorded every second. Marcus was marched toward the doors as if he were dangerous, as if the city needed protection from the man who paid rent upstairs and knew the names of the maintenance staff. Then one officer searched his wallet. Credit cards, business cards, a key fob, nothing criminal, nothing threatening. Yet the officer's expression hardened when he found a black leather card holder tucked behind the cash. He opened it and paused. For the first time, the movement around Marcus slowed. The officer looked again, then at Marcus, then back at the card. His partner stepped closer. Whatever was written there drained the certainty from both their faces. The crowd sensed the shift immediately. Phones rose higher. Whispers turned into silence. Marcus finally lifted his eyes and looked directly at them. What they had mistaken for weakness was control. What they had assumed was powerlessness was patience. And whatever they had just discovered was about to turn this public humiliation into something none of them were prepared for. The officer's grip loosened first, then the handcuffs came off so quickly they clattered to the floor. No one spoke. The same men who had shoved Marcus against the wall now stood frozen, staring at the identification card in trembling hands. It wasn't a fake badge. It wasn't a name they could dismiss. Marcus Hale was the newly appointed chairman of the Civilian Oversight Commission, the body with power to investigate police misconduct, recommend suspensions, expose unlawful arrests, and reopen buried complaints the department hoped would stay forgotten. The air in the lobby changed instantly. Neighbors who had watched in silence now stepped back in shock. The resident who made the call lowered his phone and avoided eye contact. Cameras kept recording, but now they captured something far different: panic. One officer began adjusting his uniform, trying to recover authority that had already vanished. Another attempted to explain procedure, policy, misunderstanding. His words fell apart before reaching the floor. Marcus said nothing. He slowly picked up the crushed groceries one by one. The cracked carton, the bruised fruit, the torn receipt. Every item felt heavier than it should have, carrying the weight of what had just happened. He had not been spared because the system worked. He had been spared because they discovered his title. That truth hit everyone at once. If this could happen to a man with status, influence, and legal power, what happened to those with none? Marcus finally looked around the room, the officers, the neighbors, the cameras, the city reflected through the glass doors. His silence was sharper than anger. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed one number. Within minutes, internal affairs vehicles arrived. The officers who entered the lobby now were not there to protect their own. They were there to investigate them. Marcus made it upstairs that evening, but the building felt different. The same hallway he had walked through for years now carried the memory of footsteps behind him, hands on his wrists, and neighbors watching as if he did not belong. Home was still there, but innocence was not. By sunrise, the footage had spread across the city. News stations replayed the moment officers forced an innocent man to the floor of his own lobby. Commentators debated procedure. Officials promised transparency. The two officers were placed on leave pending investigation, and the resident who made the false report issued a public apology no one believed could undo the damage. Marcus did not hold a press conference filled with anger. He did something more powerful. He ordered a full review of racial profiling complaints, body camera failures, wrongful stops, and ignored misconduct reports stretching back years. Cases once buried were reopened. Families who had been dismissed were finally heard, policies were rewritten, training changed. Accountability for once had a name and a deadline. But Marcus never called what happened to him a victory because he knew the truth. He was protected only after they learned who he was. His title created caution, his power created consequences. But countless others had no title, no cameras, no influence, and no second chance after the cuffs closed. That is what made the moment unforgettable. This was never just about one mistaken arrest in one apartment lobby. It was about how quickly suspicion can become force when prejudice is allowed to wear a badge, a smile, or a uniform. So ask yourself, if Marcus had been an ordinary man with no status, how would this story have ended? And how many others already have?